Hello, all you subjects of the internet out there. I am the Aromantic Shipper, coming at you today with yet another video. This time continuing on with my rewrite of the Walking Dead television series on part 4 by now. Now here's the thing, I mentioned when I started this rewrite series that I would be splitting it up into 6 parts. Parts 1 to 4 dealing with 3 seasons each, and parts 5 to 6 dealing with 2 seasons each. Coming out to 16 seasons in total for my rewrite of the series, as opposed to the 11 seasons that the original show will end with. But then when I got to part 3 of my rewrite, it got way longer than I thought it would, and the video ended up being almost 2 hours long. In retrospect, I probably should have limited it to only 2 seasons instead of 3, and left the introduction of the Saviors for the next video. But you can't change the past, and part 3 has already been uploaded. However, I simply can't stick to the deadlines I originally set out for rewriting this series. I am going to be getting into the Savior arc now, which is one of the longest stretches of the show and deals with a ton of characters and subplots, which means that my rewrites are going to be extensive, and if I was going to try to cover 3 seasons of my rewrite with one video, it would be insanely unreasonably long, which means that in part 4 of this video series, I am actually only going to be covering one single season. I was thinking of doing 2 instead, but then I was writing the script for Season 11 of my rewrite, and I realized that along with Season 10, it was going to end up coming out to over 2 hours in total. I have only once done a 2-hour video for this channel. It was my review of Fear the Walking Dead Season 6, and it's not exactly something that I want to make a habit of because it fucking destroys my voice. So quite honestly, I am going to be limiting my video length for all future content on this channel to less than 2 hours, which means that I am going to be doing Season 10 and Season 11 of my rewrites for The Walking Dead in 2 separate videos. I have to for my health. Now, does this mean I will be having all my future Walking Dead rewrite installments going over only a single season? Well, it will depend. I will probably be doing seasons 12 and 13 together, since they only took up one season of the original show, season 9, but since season 7 and season 8 of the original series will take up an entire season of my rewrite, I will certainly have a lot more ground to cover here. You will have to wait and see, but I will generally decide by using the 2-hour limit. Anything that reaches the limit will be split up into 2 separate videos. Well, alright then, with that information out of the way, let's get to it. When we last ended off, the beloved characters of Abraham and Glenn had their heads bashed in by Negan. And now, for part 4 of my rewrite, we will be getting neck-deep into the Savior conflict. For anyone watching, of course, be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, and before watching this video, you should probably go back and watch parts 1, 2, and 3 of my rewrites for The Walking Dead, because there will be context you will be missing in order to understand this rewrite. And of course, major spoilers ahead for both the AMC show The Walking Dead and the Walking Dead comic book created by Robert Kirkman. So then, let's just get to it. So by this point in my rewrite, I have gotten to Season 10, which will be adapting Episode 2 of Season 7 of the original series, all the way to Episode 1 of Season 8 of the original series, and will contain 20 episodes in total. By far the longest season so far, though technically speaking, since 5 episodes of Season 7 of the original show were extended, and all the episodes in my rewrites are only 45 minutes long, is not really that much more content, even though I'm adapting 16 episodes into 20. Before I get to those episodes, though, I first wanted to talk about the original Season 7 of The Walking Dead for a bit. Season 7 is considered by many people, myself included, to be the worst season of the show's run. While of course there was still some good stuff in it that it brought to the table, and I wouldn't say it was awful, it just got so dreadfully boring and tedious at times to watch, and none of the episodes in it ever came close to the quality of the season premiere. I think that the writers were stuck between a bit of a rock and a hard place. It was necessary to devote a lot of time to people being under Negan's thumb, since if All Out War began after like 6 or 7 episodes, it wouldn't feel nearly as satisfying. But at the same time, devoting so many episodes to the group trying to figure out how to fight back against Negan just kind of dragged the whole story out. It could have worked as a slow build-up if what was happening on screen was more interesting, but I don't really think the writers did a very good job of adapting the Prelude to War content from the comic books. I actually think that The Walking Dead TV show does many things better than they were done in the comics, but I think a lot of the changes and additions they made from the comic book to the screen in Season 7 were unwelcomed, and I prefer the comic book version of the events much better than what was depicted in the show. Therefore, my rewrite will be sticking much closer to the comic book than the original series, but I will still be making changes of my own to make the content more engaging and cohesive. Another thing I just wanted to say is that making these rewrites for The Walking Dead has been absolutely kicking my ass, and they've only gotten more difficult as I've gone along further in the show, with so many plot points and characters introduced by now that it is difficult to keep track. This video script took an unbelievably long time to get out there, and I still feel like I didn't cover a lot of the stuff that was in the original series. I just thought I might put that out there as an explanation as to why my rewrites going forward might feel less detailed and more generalized than my previous ones, or at least that's how I see it. You might not notice a change either way, but whatever. Anyway, let's just get to my Season 10 rewrite. Here we go. In Episode 1, the episode would start out with Rick and the group coming back to Alexandria with Abraham's corpse, that Francine, of course, cries over hysterically. Rick tells everyone what happened, barely managing to hold himself back from tears, and he tells the Alexandrians that their property belongs to Negan now. I never liked how the original show just cut out the moment where the group returns to Alexandria after their encounter with Negan, which does take place in the comic books, and it would offer a lot of great and sad character moments between the cast. Then in the rest of the episode, after the opening theme plays, things would play out following up from the end credits scene last season of Carol going to meet the king, and the episode would focus exclusively on the kingdom, with the next episode dealing with the Hilltop and Maggie, and episode 3 dealing with Alexandria and Rick. You know, the king, the widow, and the Rick. Haha, get it? I'm clever. It really isn't necessary to show that choppy, trippy sequence of Morgan and Carol making it to the kingdom like in the original, which just served to pad out the episode. Anyway, their first meeting goes pretty similar to how it does in the original, and then of course Morgan and Carol are introduced to the kingdom, with it having about as many people as Alexandria and the Hilltop. Morgan tells Carol her wounds aren't serious and the bullet only grazed her arms, and she tells Morgan, yeah, of course they did, that's why I wear baggy clothing, so people don't know where to aim. Like originally, the king takes Morgan to go out and give their offering to the saviors, but I would actually change some things in the episode. Firstly, there is no possible way that the residents of the kingdom didn't know that half their shit was going to the saviors this whole time. So in my rewrite, the residents of the kingdom are well aware that they are under the thumb of the saviors, with people like Richard being really pissed off and wanted to fight. But Ezekiel gives speeches about how although they are only partially free, they still have each other and they still have their pride as a kingdom. Also, the saviors took away all their guns in my rewrite, just as they did to Hilltop and then later Alexandria. Morgan would actually have a talk with the king, asking how many people the saviors have killed, and he tells him that they killed one person, Richard's wife, and the mother of Henry and Benjamin in my rewrite, as she was personally killed by Gavin. After hearing that the saviors only killed one person, and then after the kingdom fell in line, no one else died, Morgan is reassured that nonviolence is the key to peace, and tells the king that he did the right thing giving in to the saviors' demands, though it is clear that his psyche is cracking a bit after killing that guy to save Carol. Carol, on the other hand, is disgusted at how the people of the kingdom can just accept their subjugation to the saviors, but she keeps it to herself, acting all nice and innocent, and in my rewrite she doesn't try to run away, but instead hangs around the kingdom to try to get information. Ezekiel, of course, notices and has his little chat with her that he does in the original, and the episode ends with Jesus showing up at the kingdom to meet King Ezekiel secretly, and he sees Morgan and Carol there too. It is revealed that King Ezekiel was lying to his people about not fighting back against the saviors, as he has been slowly collecting guns and ammo that he finds on runs and hiding it from the saviors. Only his right and left hands know, Jerry and that kingdom woman who never does or says anything in the original show named Diane. Jesus tells Ezekiel that they might have a new ally in their future against the saviors, and then the episode ends. In episode 2, we would get a look at what has been happening at Hilltop with Maggie there, and also Noah and Tara, since in my rewrite Sasha is already dead by this point. Noah is there since he was trying to give Maggie medical assistance, and Tara is there because she had a big connection to Maggie and Glenn beforehand, so she is a close friend. The episode, of course, begins with Maggie waking up after suffering severe trauma after losing her baby and husband. She is, of course, greeted by Dr. Carson, who tells her that he still needs to keep an eye on her, as her pregnancy also endangered her life. The episode would largely be dedicated to Maggie becoming accustomed to the Hilltop environment, and people consoling her over her losses, only Jesus isn't there this time, leaving Maggie and friends on their own to spar with Gregory. Gregory basically complains to no end about their failure to kill Negan, saying that Jesus just took off and left for who knows where, so they have to get all the guns that Rick's group traded them back to Alexandria immediately. And Rick has to give them back all the stuff that Hilltop gave to Alexandria, so Negan doesn't ever find out about their association, when he inevitably sends someone back to Hilltop. So they make the trade, giving Alexandria their guns and taking their supplies back, which gives Maggie a chance to interact with Rick and the gang, with them sharing some heartfelt character interactions before they leave. Also, Maggie's adopted daughter would come to stay with her at Hilltop, who would call her Mommy for the first time, and she would be incredibly heartbroken over the death of Glenn and Maggie's baby. In my rewrite, we would obviously not get the weird plot line about Carl and Enid roller skating all the way to Hilltop, but Enid does get the chance to tell Maggie how much Glenn meant to her, and how he is the reason she is still at Alexandria. Of course, Gregory demands that they return to Alexandria as well, but Carson says that he needs Maggie to stay, and Noah and Tara say that they are staying with her, saying that the Saviors will never know that they are there. Walkers don't come in and raid Hilltop for an unexplained reason like in the original at the beginning, and instead things go smoothly for a few days, and Maggie is given a lot more character interactions with the Hilltop residents that weren't in the original. As the comics actually made me strangely feel more for Maggie's connection to Hilltop than the show did. And like in the comics, characters such as Brianna would actually be given relevance, and Earl Sutton would be introduced much earlier, unlike in the original series, where he basically came out of nowhere in Season 9, with him getting some of his comic book dialogue in my rewrite, humorously remarking on how Paul's nickname Jesus is disrespectful. Speaking of the devil, Jesus arrives at Hilltop to warn them that the Saviors are coming, and then Gregory has his meeting with Simon, with Maggie and friends hiding with Jesus. And I would actually change it to where Simon tells Gregory that he knows that Alexandria has some connection to Hilltop, as Rick kept trying to drive there when they kept cutting them off, and he asks Gregory why. He basically blames it all on Jesus, saying that he is a rogue actor who went against him and told Rick and the gang to kill the Saviors. And then Rick and his group barged into Hilltop, demanding half of everything and saying that they owned the place. Simon assures Gregory that their original deal is still in place and demands half of everything, and also takes Dr. Carson away from Hilltop to the satellite station, saying that they have lost their doctor privileges and that they will get him back if they behave. And Gregory sucks up to him, complimenting him on how reasonable he is for not killing anyone. And then Simon reveals that their deal will be in place tomorrow, when he will come back to pick up their payment, and for 24 hours they are on their own, and hopefully what happens next will give them an appreciation for the services they provide. Simon then breaks down the gate at Hilltop and leads a horde straight to Hilltop, shouting, "I hope you make it," with everyone fearing for their lives. However, of course, Maggie steps up, taking charge while Gregory cowers, and she leads the effort to repel the herd, with Tara and Jesus fighting, and Noah healing the wounded and amputating limbs that were bitten. In the end, with their efforts, no one is killed, and they are able to repel the attack, and afterwards we see many of the people of Hilltop gravitating towards Maggie and her crew, and being dissatisfied with Gregory, who they see as a coward. The Hilltop then prepares for Simon's pickup tomorrow, and the episode ends with Jesus secretly telling Maggie that he is trying to bring multiple communities together to prepare for a fight against the Saviors, and she needs to continue stoking the Hilltop's residents' hearts to want to fight back and possibly take over Gregory's position in the future. Maggie agrees, he leaves, and then the episode ends there. In Episode 3, it starts with the Alexandrians going about their daily life, until Michonne, who is in the watchtower, tells them that they have company, and Negan knocks on the gate yelling, little pigs, let me in." After the opening theme plays, things play out pretty similar to in the original episode Service, though with Negan being explicitly clear to Rick that they were out clearing the roads of walkers for them like in the comic book, and he also arrives on time rather than early because he is a stickler for the rules. Also, since Carl isn't there, Rick asks Negan why he didn't bring him, and Negan says that he will bring him at the next pickup as long as everything goes smoothly this time. And it's Enid who threatens the Saviors with a gun and demands to know where Carl is. Negan actually taunts Rick, saying that he is torturing Carl, just like he is Daryl, and after Rick manages to restrain himself, Negan praises him, saying that he hasn't done a damn thing to Carl. Beyond that, things play out pretty similar to the original, though cutting out some of the padding, like Michonne hunting that deer, though she would be trying to work on her aim on the watchtower, like Carol and Sasha said to her. The Saviors end up retrieving all the guns, and before they leave, Rick has a talk with Michonne about this being what they need to do to live now, but Michonne says that they can't just give up. Rick admits that he knows Judith isn't his, saying that he needed to treat her as his daughter in order for her to survive, and says that he will do anything for his children. But this is where we get to a major change I would make in my rewrite. See, in the comic books, Rick actually never gives up the fight against Negan, and is still planning to strike back against him when the time is right, though only telling Andrea about this initially. The show changed both Rick and Ezekiel's characters to have them both need to come to the realization that they have to fight Negan, and though it is a heartbreaking and engaging story to watch Rick so utterly defeated for the first time ever. That story decision ended up majorly slowing the narrative down, and it also never really made sense for me why Rick ended up deciding to fight the Saviors anyway. Negan says that if they ever tried to fight back, there would be consequences, and then Rosita tried to fight back, and someone died. So why would Rick then, after that, decide that it is time to fight back? No, in my version, Rick never gives up, and as Rick continues talking with Michonne, that is made clear as he tells her that they need to bide their time and wait until they get Carl back, and then when Negan thinks he is safe, that is when they strike. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but we will kill him. He's already dead. Then it is revealed that Jesus is in Alexandria, and Rick tells him to follow the Savior trucks, as if Negan came personally, then he will be going back to where he lives, and not just an outpost. And Jesus tells Rick that he will report back to him when he finds where Negan lives. The episode then ends with him tracking the Saviors. Just to keep track of the time frame, by now, 1 week, 7 days have passed since the Season 9 finale. In Episode 4, we'll be getting a look at the sanctuary that Jesus is trying to locate. In my last rewrite, I said how Carl got his arm chopped off, and after that Negan took him back to the sanctuary to get treated, so he never sneaks into a truck to get there, like he does in the comics and in the original show. The episode starts off with Carl waking up at the sanctuary being treated by Dr. Emmett Carson. He says he is sorry for the fact that he lost his hand and tells him that he should behave himself and do what they say. Then Negan barges in and greets Carl, welcoming him to the sanctuary and telling him that he is going to Alexandria soon for a pickup, and whether or not he lets Carl go home will entirely depend on his father's behavior during that pickup. The opening theme plays and it cuts to after the events of the previous episode. This episode will be dedicated to showcasing the goings-on at the sanctuary through Carl's eyes, while occasionally cutting back to Daryl on Easy Street, with some added scenes of Daryl being beaten senseless by Fat Joey in my rewrite. The stuff with Dwight will be moved to next episode. Negan shows Carl around the sanctuary, and he finds it to be quite different than he expected. Something that, oddly enough, was more heavily focused on in the comic books than it was in the show is that there are a bunch of normies living at the sanctuary. Just regular people like mothers, fathers, children, even pregnant women. And in this episode, we see a lot of them just going about the mundane of life, eating lunch, going to work, playing games, and we also see more of how they see Negan. Carl realizes that many of his men and people fear him, but they also seem to have some respect for him. Carl says that they don't realize how much of a monster he really is, and that his group encountered a guy like him before called the Governor, who also kept the truth from his people. But then Negan takes Carl out to deliver a message with him to everyone in the cafeteria. My people, this little asshole is Carl, and he is the son of the motherfucker who led an attack and slaughtered every single person at the satellite outpost. Now, he is going to be staying with us for the moment as a hostage, because don't you worry, his dad's not going to be messing with us anymore. I set him straight. I killed 2 of his people right in front of them, one of them right in front of his pregnant wife. And then I made this kid's father cut off his own arm. I have that little prick wrapped around my finger, and just the other day I went to his home and got back everything they stole from us at the satellite outpost, and much more. We are eating good tonight, as we do every night at the sanctuary. Greatest place on earth. The people cheer, and Carl is utterly flabbergasted. The rest of the episode is dedicated mostly to Negan and Carl's interactions, with Negan taking a liking to Carl and giving him the royal treatment. We see how almost childish Negan's behavior is, with him constantly asking Carl to do stuff like play paddleball with him, and there's a humorous scene where Negan tries to find a way for Carl to play the Wii with him only having one hand, and contrasted to Daryl's horrific treatment by the Saviors. We of course get the scene with Negan's wives, who are dressed much skimpier like they are in the comic books. Also, I'm really pissed off that the show cut out some of Negan's funniest lines from the comic book, so in my rewrite he would tell Carl that all the women in Alexandria dressed like 40-year-old lesbians, including Laura, who in my rewrite is pretty much an entirely different character. In the original series, Laura was a savior who didn't get much focus, but she was actually kind of important, as she was with Negan before any of the other people he gathered under his command. And she relayed the information that Dwight was a traitor to Negan. In my rewrite, Laura is Negan's head wife, the only one who it seems actually truly loves him, and she is always by his side, ready to pounce on any of his other wives if they try anything against him, which explains why they can't just kill Negan themselves. She will be given a much bigger role in the future than in the original series, but for this episode she isn't too important. Anyway, we get the scene with the iron, and then Negan sits Carl down and explains to him that he isn't some brutal monster, and he doesn't want to kill him or his father, but he is rebuilding civilization, and civilization needs hierarchy. He created the Saviors, so he is on top. Then his council, made up of people closest to him, like Dwight, Simon, and Laura, are below him. Then his normie saviors below them, and then his citizens, not workers in my rewrite, below them, and the communities he takes tribute from below them, and finally those not part of his civilization at the scum of the earth. He tells Carl it can be so much easier for him and Alexandria if he just obeys him. But then later, Carl feigns passing out from blood loss to get Negan to drop his guard, and then when he gets close, he tries to kill him using broken wine glass. The episode then goes into a small skirmish between the two, with Carl furiously using everything he can to try to kill Negan in his office. But ultimately, Negan of course gets a hold of him and locks him in a room. Then we get the scene with Daryl being asked if he is Negan, and then he says, after he says, "I'm Daryl," Negan decides to bring him over to Carl, and asks Carl if he would be willing to join him. And if he does, then Daryl doesn't have to be tortured anymore, but Daryl gestures Carl to say no, and Carl tells Negan that he will never stop trying to kill him for what he did. Then Negan plays one last hand and says that there was a savior who was very interested in meeting the two of them. He brings out Morales, introduced much earlier in my rewrite, unlike how he was just kind of thrown in there originally in Season 8, and then Negan leaves him alone to talk with Daryl and Carl. He talks about many of the things that he talked about with Rick in the original series to them, about how many of the people in Atlanta survived, and it seems like he is both pissed off at them, but also feels sorry for them. He tells them about how Negan saved him and gave him a place to call home, and how he was the only one who survived after he went away from Rick. Except for his wife, who was in the satellite station while he was away, and was killed because of Officer Friendly. He tells them that Glenn didn't deserve to die, and when he saw him die behind the other saviors at Negan's introduction, he wanted to tell Negan to stop. But his wife didn't deserve to die either, or many of the people at that outpost. But most people who don't deserve to die do, and that is just the way things are now. He proclaims, "I am Negan," and the episode ends with Jesus looking at the sanctuary. In episode 5, we get the Dwight stuff that we got in the original episode of the series, The Cell. It is a look into his character, and we get all the scenes of him we do in the original episode with him going to hunt down that runner, whose name I can't remember, so I'm just going to call him Dwight's friend. Dwight kills him since he won't come back in order to prove his loyalty to Negan. However, there's also quite a bit more to this episode as well. So let's talk about Jesus for a second. Much like Andrea, Jesus is a character whose role in the show was highly reduced compared to the comics, and he just had so many kick-ass scenes that were cut in the show. One thing that was cut is him tracking down the sanctuary to figure out where it is, which, as I said last episode, Rick hired him to do. We see in detail how he managed to get there by tracking the truck that left Alexandria and his sneaky maneuvers trying to get past all the guards. In fact, Dwight and his men actually locate him and a shootout commences, but with him not having a gun. He masks himself so no one can get a look at his face and manages to successfully evade all the saviors, not killing any, so as not to draw unnecessary outrage and attention. And after he makes it to the sanctuary, he then goes back to Rick to report where he is. Negan says that he has a new assignment for Dwight, and the saviors have been inspecting various communities for any funny business going on, except for the kingdom, and he wants Dwight to check it out. Carl gets into an altercation with the Savior, who says that a lot of his friends were killed in the satellite outpost, and he knocks Carl to the ground, but is stopped when he is reminded that Negan said he wanted to be unharmed, so he walks away. However, later he notices that the gun he had on him is missing, and he asks who took it, and it is revealed that it was Carl, and the episode then ends. In episode 6, we do not get the Terra-centric episode like in the original, where she miraculously just washes up on Oceanside because that was pointless filler bullshit that only served as poor setup so that Rick could get more guns to fight the Saviors later. Don't get me wrong, Oceanside isn't just being cut out of my rewrite, but will be introduced next season in a much less contrived manner. Also, this means that my boy Heath isn't just written out of the series randomly. The episode was first cut back to the events going on at the Kingdom. It showcases more of Morgan building his friendship with the King and with Benjamin. I'm actually moving up the stuff that happens later in the original series in my rewrite, and I am deciding to group the establishment of other communities together before the plot really starts to get moving. In this episode, Dwight basically ends up infiltrating the Kingdom, just like he tricked Daryl and Aaron, saying that his name is David, and he was on his own out there, and he will contribute to the Kingdom if they let him stay. Ezekiel ultimately decides to let him stay, and he tries to gather information about whether or not the Kingdom is gearing up to fight the Saviors. However, due to Ezekiel's deception, he doesn't find out anything, and since he never came into contact with Carol or Morgan, they don't know about each other. However, Carol is extremely suspicious of him, especially with how his half-face matches the description of the guy Daryl said he encountered. But she keeps it close to her chest and continues surveying the kingdom and telling Morgan how it is a pleasant fantasy that will fall apart if something isn't done. While Morgan keeps running with his all life is precious stance and instructing Benjamin how to wield his staff. Meanwhile, of course, Richard would still be wanting to get revenge for his wife's death, and tries to convince the king to do something to fight back. However, Carol, who is not just pushing out of fighting in my version, tells Richard that if Ezekiel won't listen to him before something happens, then something has to happen before he will listen, which means Carol is actually responsible in my rewrite for Richard's resolve to make the Saviors act against them, and I would cut out his plan in the original to sacrifice Carol. Meanwhile, Dwight would be satisfied with what he has seen and fake getting separated from the group while out on a run to go back to the sanctuary to tell Negan that there are some dissenters of the kingdom, but for the most part everyone there is accepting of the deal with the Saviors, including the king. Then back at the sanctuary, we will see the payoff of Carl taking that Savior's gun. He waits for his moment to get close to Negan and approaches him ready to shoot after he gets back from doing various Negan things. But other Saviors notice him about to take the shot and try to stop him, and then Carl shoots them and almost shoots Negan before he is slammed to the ground. And Negan tells them not to hurt him, and the episode ends with Negan reassuring his men that there will definitely be a punishment. He just has to figure out what it's going to be. In episode 7, it would of course showcase Negan trying to screw with Carl's head, like in the original show, asking him to sing him a song, but also with some added bits of dialogue like saying, "You killed 4 men, Carl, 4 men, one of whom had a wife, by the way. Granted, she's my wife now, but still. Do you even think about the people you kill, Carl? No, you and Rick the Prick just go around slaughtering whoever gets in your way without a second thought, do you? I think about the people I kill all the time. I think about how satisfying it was to see Rick shit himself when I bashed the Asian and the Ginger's heads in, and how doing so will prevent a lot of people being killed by Rick in the future. Negan says that he is a man of his word and will still deliver Carl back to Alexandria like he promised Rick, but there's going to have to be some payback for what Carl did, but it might just be able to be avoided if Carl says 3 simple words, "I am Negan." However, Carl still refuses. The other portion of this episode would focus on the exploits of the Alexandrians. In the comics, Rick and Andrea go out looking for Carl after he sneaks into Negan's truck, and I think I remember it being a front for them going to meet with Jesus. So in my version, I am implementing this plot point with them saying they need to go out to look for Morgan and Carol. Jesus reassures them that he saw them at the kingdom, but they didn't see him, and Jesus tells them about where the sanctuary is located, meaning I am cutting out the pointless plot point in the ritual of Michonne going to locate it herself. Jesus says that after Negan leaves to bring Carl back, he can bring Daryl out, and then he goes away. The episode would be dedicated to more interactions between Rick and Michonne, with them looking to find more guns, and Rick explaining to her that he had to comply to let the Saviors take all of them, since they couldn't yet fight back against them, and Carl and Daryl probably would have been killed, and that Eugene can simply make as many bullets as they need later, and he tells Michonne that he trusts her and is only willing to tell her about his plan, as he needs everyone acting convincingly towards Negan that they are really submitting to him, and they can't risk Negan finding out about their plan. Meanwhile, back at Alexandria, Spencer voices more frustration with Rick's leadership, and says that if it were up to him, they wouldn't be in the position they are in, with Gabe calling him out on his bullcrap. His relationship with Rosita would be developed with him serving as her rebound after Abraham. However, she clearly hasn't gotten past his death, as Rosita would demand that Eugene create bullets for her. Not just one this time, because why would you ever want just one? And she actually has 2 guns that she can use. She of course grills Eugene, who says that they should just submit to Negan for his cowardice, and says that they have to get revenge for him. And in my rewrite, Francine actually gets word of their plan and demands that she gets one of the guns and some bullets, so that she can also try to get revenge on Negan for Abraham. Rick gets back to Alexandria, after which Spencer taunts Rick about his failure in leadership, like he does in the episode's Service originally, and rather than threatening to break Spencer's jaw like in the original, Rick actually threatens to kill him. Later, Rick realizes that they are quite low on supplies and needs something to give Negan soon, so he goes out to look with Aaron, like in the original series, and then the episode ends. In episode 8, the plot will once again shift focus back to the events at Hilltop, with the residents expecting the Saviors to come back soon for another pickup. It of course shows Maggie becoming a more confident leader there, while Gregory becomes more and more uncomfortable and trying to assert his own authority. Back at the kingdom, it would focus on the exploits we see later in the original series. While Carol is still recovering, Richard implements his plan to force King Ezekiel's hand against the Saviors by delaying the delivery of their supplies and chincing them on the melon. He is prepared to die, but instead his son Benjamin gets shot in the leg by Jared, and Morgan then goes crazy, seeing visions like in the original, and almost offs himself, but finds out that it was Richard who was responsible. He of course confronts Richard about it, who said that he wasn't trying to get his son killed, and that he was the one who was prepared to die, and he also lets it slip that Carol was the one who suggested to him that something needed to happen to get King Ezekiel to fight back. He tells Morgan that someone had to die so that no one else did, and Morgan tells him that's exactly right. And he tells Richard that after they deliver the last melon tomorrow, they will need to have a talk with King Ezekiel about it. Then it catches daybreak, with it now being the day Simon goes back to Hilltop for another shipment. Negan returns to Alexandria to pick up his payment, this time being Dwight with him. And the kingdom goes to correct their last payment, and the episode ends with Jesus meeting back up at the sanctuary to break in and rescue Daryl. In episode 9, there would of course be the scene with Aaron and Rick going out to get the supplies from the boat surrounded by walkers, this time in my rewrite with Aaron's words to Rick about how he is being the bigger man and sacrificing his pride for the greater good of Alexandria, ringing hollow, since Rick knows he is just planning to fight back anyway. And Aaron also tells him that he misses Daryl, but even though he hates Negan, he met a lot of bad people like him back in his previous line of work, and fighting them only would make things worse, really driving that guilt even further into Rick. Then, of course, Jadis would be seen watching them from the distance, telling her people that it isn't time yet, and they need to wait and observe them more before making their move, with anybody capable of stealing that prize being someone dangerous to mess with. Back at the sanctuary, unlike in the original series, where Sherry is responsible for getting Daryl out, with Jesus just kind of there, goddammit, why didn't the show utilize Jesus more? You all need Jesus, writers. It is Jesus who ends up breaking Daryl out of his confinement. He manages to break into the sanctuary single-handedly and infiltrate after Negan leaves with Carl, Dwight, and a bunch of his men, and manages to kill quite a few Saviors covertly and get Daryl out of his confinement. But on their way out, Sherry ends up distracting some guards for them, telling them that they went in a different direction, and then tells Daryl and Jesus to take her and her sister with them. And Daryl, who has been shown kindness by Sherry, agrees to take them. Dr. Emmett Carson, who also wants to leave, is also taken, but Jesus says they are taking way too many people for a covert plan, and indeed things end up going very wrong as they end up having to fight their way out, with Carson getting recaptured. The escapees then come across another one of Dwight's friends that says he can't go with them, but he does understand why they are trying to escape, and ultimately lets them go. But during their escape, Sherry's sister gets chomped on by a walker on the wall, and only Daryl, Jesus, and Sherry end up making it out alive, with Jesus suffering multiple gunshot grazes after they were taking too long to go. Thus ends the plot at the sanctuary for the episode, and leads us into the Alexandria content. On the drive there, Negan asks Carl if he thinks anyone is going to die when they get back, whether he thinks it will be because of his own actions, and who it will be, and tells him to just stew on those thoughts during the car ride there. They end up arriving, demanding to see Rick, but he is told he is out on a run, and that Negan specified that this would be the day of payment, but never specified the time. So Negan is satisfied and decides to wait at Alexandria with Carl, checking out all their facilities like in the original series, with added scenes of Enid going to see Carl, incredibly worried about him, as they haven't seen each other since he left Alexandria. But Carl is incredibly wary about her interaction with him, as he keeps seeing Negan looking at her. This plotline would end with Spencer approaching Negan and telling him that they have a pool table. Back at the hilltop, Simon would arrive for his payment, and at the kingdom, Morgan confronts Carol about her goading Richard into provoking the Saviors, saying how it is also partly her fault for what happened to Benjamin. And he tells her that if she ever tries anything like that again, he will kill her. He doesn't want to, but he will kill her because he doesn't want anyone else to die, mirroring Carol's exact words to Morgan back in Season 8, with the roles now reversed, and Carol is incredibly heartbroken and guilty about what happened to Benjamin, and sees how unstable and on edge Morgan is acting, and wondering if he really would kill her. Then this plotline ends with Morgan and the kingdom going out to meet the Saviors to correct their payment. In episode 10, everything set up so far for all 4 of the plotlines come to a head in a mini-climax of sorts, and I will go through the events in the Kingdom, the Hilltop, and Alexandria separately, but they would all happen simultaneously in an episode to mirror one another. Firstly, the one taking up the least amount of screen time, the Hilltop plotline. Simon would of course demand his payment from them, but take note of how it is somewhat lacking compared to previous orders. It is clearly established through this that the Hilltop is hurting and isn't able to sustain the kind of offerings that are given to Negan. However, Simon doesn't care, and when some of the Hilltop residents start complaining that he has taken too much, Simon comments on how the residents of the Hilltop repelled with the Walker hordes pretty well, and asks how many people died. He then says that he was trying to be creative in sending the messages, but he could have just gone with the standard savior package, and sends a round into the head of one of Earl Sutton's sons, killing him. He then tells Gregory to keep his people in line, and then Gregory gives a speech to everyone that they need to do what the saviors say so nobody else will die, to which nobody's impressed as Simon leaves. Meanwhile, we have Morgan going out with King Ezekiel to bring the melon to the saviors, and the scene plays out exactly as it did originally, with Morgan strangling Richard to death and telling the saviors that they don't have to worry about anything anymore. Only this time Morgan actually means it. Morgan and Carol were actually 2 of my favorite characters at one point, but their writing could get a little wonky at points, so I'm going to be changing up their motivations for the Savior story arc. Morgan's resolve to slaughter all the Saviors after Benjamin died was just way too sudden of a character turn for him. So in my rewrite, Morgan's motivations are more complex, and he killed Richard to show the Saviors that they were loyal to them, so that they wouldn't kill anyone else, and he tells King Ezekiel that it had to be done so that Richard wouldn't get anyone else killed, like his other son Henry, and that they will just tell Henry that the Saviors killed him. Since Richard is Henry's son in my rewrite, Morgan's relationship with Henry would be even more strained since he murdered his father. However, the other Kingdomites would be very uneasy around Morgan and consider if he posed a danger to the kingdom, unlike how originally King Ezekiel was weirdly not even that upset about Morgan killing Richard. After Morgan gets back and Carol realizes what he did, she is incredibly disturbed and goes to Ezekiel immediately, saying that they need to talk, and she admits to emboldening Richard in his plan, but says that they will need to do something to fight back with the food shortages they have been having at the kingdom, just like at Hilltop. And Ezekiel says that he knows and has been planning to fight back against the Saviors for a while now, but never told anyone. He then tells Morgan the truth that he was planning to go to war with the Saviors, meaning both Richard and Morgan's actions were completely unnecessary, and Morgan breaks down, with yet another blow dealt to his fragile mental health. Meanwhile, back at Alexandria, Negan of course calls Spencer out for having no guts before gutting him, and Rosita fires a shot, but she doesn't miss Negan point-blank range like originally, because that was just dumb, and instead, a rat shoots her in the arm, causing her to miss Negan in the bat, and his bat. However, this isn't the end of it, as Francine then pulls out a gun, thinking Negan won't expect a second shot, and almost kills Negan, but is redirected by a shot in the arm as well. But she does blow a hole in Negan's bat, and then Negan goes on about how much he loves his baseball bat, and how he isn't ashamed to admit that he jerks off to it, like he said in the comic books, because how dare they cut out that line. And this is where we get to a major change in my rewrite. Negan had an incredible introduction in the series, killing off 2 fan-favorite characters, which really made it seem like no one was safe around him. But in the mid-season finale of Season 7, while Olivia is killed for Rosita's outburst, I felt almost no attachment to her, as she was a character with not that much screen time or plot relevancy. Thus, this time, Negan's visit back to Alexandria will be more of a bloodbath, with 2 more characters other than her dying. Since Dwight is there, Negan would demand that he kill someone at random for Rosita's offense, and Dwight kills Denise, unlike how he killed her on the tracks earlier in the original series. This time, Tara is actually there to witness and react to her death, since by this point she would have come back to Alexandria from Hilltop to see her girlfriend, only for her to then die, making it much more impactful, especially considering the 2 had more time to interact as a couple by this point. He then tells Dwight to kill someone else at random for Francine's events, and he shoots Olivia, with Negan joking afterwards that he is really intent on killing all the fatties. Rick, of course, gets back in time for Negan to personally carry out his last kill of the day with Lucille, and Carl's worst fears have come true, as he tells Enid to step forth and bashes her brains in front of everyone, with her last words being, "just survive somehow," which were Carl's last words to her before he got captured by Negan last season. Yep, Enid is dying much earlier in my rewrite, and her role in the series and her eventual death at the hands of the Whisperers will actually be given to Noah. Carl is completely devastated, and so is Rick, and Negan then makes a speech to the Alexandrians that it doesn't have to be this way if they all just stop fighting him and accept their circumstances. So he takes off with Eugene, and then after Rick and Michonne try to confront Carl, Rick discusses what happened with Michonne, and then of course they come to the conclusion that they can't keep their secret plan from everyone anymore. So Rick gives a speech to Alexandria telling them of the secret plan he was keeping from them in order to take down Negan. He said that he thought it was necessary to keep it a secret, and in some ways it was, as Spencer would have ratted them out. But it also led to the deaths of 2 people and losing their bullet maker Eugene. However, Rick says that the worst part about his plan was that it was undemocratic, and he couldn't take matters into his own hands, and that Alexandria needed to decide as a community what they wanted to do. And if anyone felt the same way Spencer did, then don't hesitate to step forth. However, ultimately most Alexandrians stand with Rick and decide to fight the Saviors. Meanwhile, to parallel this, the same speech is made by Maggie at Hilltop, with most of her residents there deciding that they want to fight, especially Earl and his wife, to get revenge on the bastards who killed their sons. And at the Kingdom, Ezekiel gives the same speech, with the majority of people there also wanting to go to war, especially Henry, whose entire family is dead by this point. By this point, 21 days have passed since the Season 9 finale. In episode 11, we would actually be jumping forward a bit and following the events of the Hostiles and Calamities episode with Eugene first, before we get back to the stuff with our heroes. To be honest, I would change almost nothing in this episode, outside of a few minor tweaks. It's strangely really good, honestly. The first thing is that when Eugene asks for lobster, he isn't turned down and is told that they do have seafood, courtesy of Oceanside, the first mention of it in my rewrite, as it would actually be a community still under the rule of Negan. Also, Negan would be seen trying to deal with the complete havoc that Jesus caused in his break-in of the sanctuary. And also, Negan would not kill Dr. Emmett Carson because that was just plain stupid. Even if you have a replacement, doctors are like diamonds in the apocalypse, and you don't just throw diamonds into the fire. Instead, rather than punishing Carson for trying to escape, he would instead kill that friend of Dwight I mentioned earlier who allowed Jesus to escape with everyone, which Negan found out about, with Lucille this time after getting her repaired because he seriously needed to execute more people with that bat. It was just too iconic. And Dr. Carson knew him pretty well as a friend, so it would serve to punish him and Dwight. And Negan would tell Carson that the next time he did something like that, he would go down to Hilltop and kill his wife. However, this would further serve to tip Dwight over the edge, and after Dwight has his awkward "We are Negan" chat with Eugene, Negan tells Dwight that if Daryl was broken out, then it had to be someone from the communities. So they're going to search them soon, and he is sending Dwight back to the Kingdom to search for anything suspicious undercover again, and he wishes him the best of luck in finding Sherry. In episode 12, Gabriel would not steal a bunch of food from the Alexandria pantry to, I think, give it to those trash people. I don't even remember, honestly. That was such a weird development. No, instead, Rick and the crew would, of course, go to Hilltop to meet Maggie, where she would get to see Daryl again. Daryl also gets to see and interact with his bro Aaron again, because we are keeping that friendship in my rewrite. One major difference is that Sherry is now there, and Rick and the group would be trying to pry information out of her, but she would say that she doesn't know anything of note, and ask to be given a car and some food so that she can get out of there before the Saviors find her. Rick, of course, being very cautious, says that they can't just let her go, as she could report back to Negan, but Daryl vouches for her, seeing as how he owes her for helping him escape from Negan's compound by redirecting the guards. So Sherry leaves and gives Daryl a letter to give to Dwight if he ever sees him again, explaining why she left. Rick and the group would try to convince Gregory to join the fight, but he would lay down the law, saying that fighting the Saviors is a fool's errand, and Rick has already cost him enough already. So then Jesus tells Rick that it is time for him to meet King Ezekiel, whose kingdom engages in trading with the Hilltop, and who has a secret desire to defeat Negan. Meanwhile, Dwight would go back to the kingdom, telling them that he got separated and surrounded by walkers for a while. So he is welcomed back, but of course Carol, almost sure that he is bullshitting, corners him unsuspectedly in the kingdom and knocks him out, telling Ezekiel that he is likely a spy for the Saviors. And then the group get back to the kingdom, and when the group get to the kingdom, it is not quite as happy as a reunion as before, as Carol and especially Morgan are trying to grapple with how their actions resulted in people dying unnecessarily. Morgan would continue to try to tell Rick that going to war with the Saviors is the wrong path, while Carol would vouch for the strength and competence of Rick and the group to the king. Meanwhile, Henry would be trying to deal with the fact that his entire family is dead, and would be wanting revenge against the Saviors more than anything. Also, in the comic books, there is this really funny interaction between Michonne and Ezekiel where they basically have a sword measuring contest, and I'm keeping it because it is iconic. During Rick's speech to Ezekiel, who would test Rick by telling him that he doesn't think they can win against the Saviors, Rick would not use that rock in the road story because that was honestly just kind of dumb and confusing as a metaphor, and he would instead talk to the king about a man who he once knew before named Herschel, who once said, "You step outside, you risk your life. You take a drink of water, you risk your life. And nowadays, you breathe, and you risk your life. Every moment now, you don't have a choice. The only thing you can choose is what you're risking it for." Ezekiel says that he likes Rick's conviction, and unlike in the original series where King Ezekiel refuses Rick's offer, further dragging out the story, this time he accepts Rick's aid and says that even though they are massively outgunned, due to Carol earlier today, they just gained an incredible advantage in the war. So they show the group Dwight, who has been imprisoned. However, when they go to interrogate him, he says that he is willing to share any information that he has with them, as he hates Negan, possibly more than they do. And with both of his friends dead and his wife having escaped, Negan has no bargaining chip to threaten him with anymore, and he says that the one consultation he had while he was doing all those horrible things in the service of Negan is that one day he would be close enough to Negan to take him down. Daryl is, of course, incredibly hesitant to trust Dwight since he betrayed him before, but Rick admits that they need an inside man to win, and they tell Dwight that Sherry is long gone by now, and they hand him her letter from her, telling him not to follow her because she loved who he was, but doesn't love the person he became. So Dwight accepts this and says that his only goal now is to take Negan down for revenge, and he gives Rick's group all kinds of information about the Saviors, including outposts, lookouts, walkie-talkie frequencies, and the location of a buried stash of guns that they could use, as well as more difficult-to-obtain Savior weapons. He also says that they need to let him report back to Negan eventually, or he will get suspicious, and that they need to hurry back to Hilltop and Alexandria to prepare for when the Saviors come to ransack the communities looking for Daryl and Sherry. And Ezekiel agrees to keep Daryl at Kingdom, with Jesus staying there too, while the other characters rush back to warn their respective communities. And the episode ends there. In episode 13, the characters will get back to their communities right in time for the Saviors to arrive and start wrecking their shit to try to find Jesus and Daryl. And at Hilltop, Simon of course tells Gregory that if he ever needs any help dealing with any insurrections or questions to his authority, then all he needs to do is contact him, and Maggie, her daughter, and Noah are able to prevent being found out because of a proper warning. The Alexandrites then make a plan to go find out if the information Dwight gave them was true in order to get more weapons they can use, which means that Dwight would be providing them with the resources they need, cutting out the need to introduce Oceanside in this season completely. However, there is one significant addition I would make in the Prelude to War arc in The Walking Dead. Carl's pacifistic turn in Season 8 of the original series came completely out of nowhere, so in my rewrite I wanted to give him a much better explanation for it. While Rick is incredibly happy to see his son back safe with him again, Rick is almost completely focused now on the war with the Saviors, as is Michonne, and Carl notices this and confronts Rick, telling him about the questions he has been having as to whether or not they are doing the right thing, as he tried to kill Negan, but that ended up with his girlfriend's brains being splattered on the ground right in front of him. "We've been fighting for so long, Dad, and fighting is what has kept us alive, but maybe now it's time we adapt. Maybe fighting is the wrong choice here. I mean, remember what happened with the prison? You once took away my gun and tried to teach me about nonviolence. Maybe if we hadn't attacked the satellite outpost, Glenn wouldn't be dead right now." After he says this, Rick gets real quiet, and then we see a completely different side of him than how he normally interacts with his son come out. "What the fuck did you say to me? Did you say that I am responsible for Glenn's death? It was Negan. Do you understand that? Negan is the reason why Sasha, Abraham, Glenn, Denise, Spencer, Olivia, and Enid are dead. It's not on us. And sure, if we are going to war, of course people are going to die. But you won't die. Michonne won't die. Judith won't die. Even if every other resident of Alexandria dies, I will never let it come to that. Do you understand me?" Carl also mentions Shane and asks his dad why he even killed him in the first place if he was just going to end up becoming exactly like him, and Rick admits that he should have listened to Shane sooner, and if he had, perhaps more people would have been alive right now, including him. However, Carl is still incredibly worried about what might be to come, and tells Rick about how he encountered Morales at the Savior compound and how his wife was killed at the Savior outpost, and about how there are a lot of innocent people back at the sanctuary, and he's questioning if they can really even be called the good guys anymore. But Rick says that it doesn't matter if they are or not, because they are alive, and that's all that matters. And only by taking a proactive approach to dealing with threats like Negan can they truly be safe. Carl also talks to Michonne about this, and they have a family chat, with Michonne largely agreeing with Rick. This happens while the three are out on a run, and Carl is trained to be able to handle himself with only one arm now, which will replace the interactions in the original series of Michonne and Rick going to get guns, which were kind of cute but ultimately not that necessary, which means there's no CGI deer that appeared for like 10 seconds but everyone lost their shit over, or the bullshit Rick fake-out death, as the show would have shifted more focus to Carl, seeing as how his death next season was really important. Also in this episode, Rosita would be talking with Tara, regretting that she tried to kill Negan since it led to the death of her girlfriend Denise. And of course Francine would be incredibly distraught over her actions leading to the death of Olivia, and going to see Gabriel about it, talking to him about how she was fully prepared to die herself, and Gabriel would try to console Francine, telling her that she didn't know what would happen, and self-sacrifice is something that he doesn't think he could do. Also, to give Tobin more screen time, I guess in my rewrite he would be Francine's uncle and would tell her not to do anything like that again, as Carol had already left him, so she is almost all he has left. Tara would tell Rosita that it wasn't her fault, and that all she wants to do is kill Dwight, and that they all need to make sure they take revenge on the Saviors for everyone they have killed. Heath agrees, who is on a run with them, as well as most underutilized character Scott, and he tells them that he wants to kill Dwight too for what he did to Sasha. However, while the two of them are out on the road, they end up getting swarmed by walkers, and then while they are distracted, they end up getting jumped by the garbage people, who had been following them for a while. Meanwhile, back at Kingdom, Jesus is talking to Dwight, who is still prisoner there, and Dwight talks about the plan to defeat the Saviors, and he says that while a lot of the Saviors are complete assholes, there are innocent civilians living at the sanctuary, and his condition for helping them is that they spare them. However, then Jesus is called by King Ezekiel, who says that he had been holding Morgan after he killed Richard, but he can't find him anywhere in the kingdom now. In the comics, there was a scene where Jesus chased after a member of Hilltop who went to warn the Saviors of their plan to defeat them to stop the war, and I'm going to be implementing that into my rewrite, but Jesus chases after Morgan instead, who left to tell Gavin what Kingdom was planning. When Jesus catches up to Morgan, he throws 2 spears at his neck, trying to kill him, saying that he will kill people if they threaten the lives of others, and that telling Negan of their plan will save lives that will die in the war, and he gets into a fight with Jesus, who kicks his ass, saying that his technique is good, but he wasn't trained to kill, and he could train him if he wanted. Jesus says that he will kill Morgan if he threatens to divulge information to Negan, but that he recognizes his skills and wants him to help to fight to save lives. We get more insight into why Jesus wants to take down Negan so badly, unlike in the original series, with him saying that he doesn't have anyone he is particularly close to at Hilltop, but he is more loyal to the idea of a just civilization that isn't ruled through fear and intimidation. And he ultimately convinces Morgan to change his mind, saying that even if he tells Negan of their plan, they're still going to fight back anyway, and they have a much greater chance of dying. So when Morgan gets back to the kingdom, he says he will fight in the war even though he doesn't want to, and he will kill to save people. Then the episode ends there. Rick and the group take Dwight up on his offer and investigate all the places that he said they could get weapons covertly. They uncover a bunch of guns and ammunition buried in a secret location only those closest to Negan had access to, and they are able to stay ahead of the game by tuning into the frequency the Saviors are using on their walkies that Dwight told them about. They go to more Savior posts and have to kill some Saviors covertly, confident that if their people can continue relaying to the Saviors, they can fool them for less than 2 weeks until Negan comes back for another pickup. And there is that scene where they grab the explosives like in the original series, but they don't split like 100 walkers in half with a wire pulled by a car, because that was just ridiculous. They also consider going back to the sanctuary to rescue Eugene, as they want to get more ammo, but decide that that isn't a good idea, as the sanctuary will be on high alert since Jesus has broken Daryl out. Now that they have a bunch of weapons, they are feeling a lot better about trusting Dwight, but not all is well, as they soon realize that Scott's group has gone missing, and they find a note from the garbage people telling them that they have them, and to meet them at the junkyard where they are. So Rick goes with a sizable force to meet Jadis, who he is surprised has a bunch of guns too. Rick demands to see Scott and the others, and we get a good look at the Junkyard Society. One of the worst aspects of the Scavengers in the original, and why it was such a boring show-only edition, is that the group itself was characterized unbelievably poorly, with no characterization given to anyone other than Jadis, who herself was extremely uninteresting until all of her people died in Season 8, and she just talked and acted really weirdly with no explanation, saying things like, "We take, we don't bother." In my rewrite, we would get to see a lot more of the garbage people, with us getting a much better feel for how they act, showing the genuine care and love that they have towards one another, with it being noticed that many of them speak broken English or none at all, which would serve as an explanation for why Jadis talks sort of funny. She was able to gather many immigrants who were left behind by society to form her community at a junkyard, where many of them would often meet up to scavenge for anything that could be valuable before the apocalypse. We get a sense how much Jadis cares for her people, and the episode would end with Rick threatening to light up her people if they don't release their people to them, and Jadis showing him that they are kept in a storage container, with Scott not being amongst them. In episode 15, it picks up where the last one left off, and Rick asks where Scott is, and Jadis takes her other prisoners out to meet him, who has been stripped naked and is being painted, and Scott tells Rick that Jadis is fucking crazy, and that he can't tell because of the way she speaks, but he is pretty sure that Jadis wants to rape him. When Rick asks Jadis why she kidnaps people, she says that she and her other people appreciate the human form, and like to kidnap people and paint and sculpt them and have sex with them before they kill them. So yeah, Jadis is still pretty freaking weird and messed up in my rewrite too. She tells her people to strip Tara, Heath, Rosita, and Francine down next. But then Rick gets a hold of her and puts a knife to her throat, and all of the people he brought with him get ready for a fight. Jadis is impressed and reveals that she was testing Rick, and brought them there because she knows that they are planning to fight back against Negan, and she wants to help them as her people also give Negan half of everything too. She says that if Rick doesn't agree to partner with them, then she will turn them all into Negan, and she makes her demands for their aid. She wants her cut of the spoils of war and a promise that the other communities won't bother her as long as she doesn't bother them. And she wants 50 living saviors as prisoners given to her, and she wants to be given vacation homes in Alexandria, and she still wants to paint and fuck all the people she captured. Rick knows that he will need their support and that he can't let them warn Negan, but he says the last condition is off the table. So he says that, so she says she will fuck Rick instead, after which Michonne slaps her, and then she offers to fuck Michonne, after which Rick slaps her. And then she says she will just fuck Scott, who they already sculpted, and that he is the perfect male specimen. And if she can't, then there is no deal. Scott is, of course, super against this, but since he is single, Rick and the group consider it, and Carol, who is there, basically just comes out and says that he has to take one for the team, and Scott reluctantly agrees, saying this is some old bullshit. However, Rick also tells Jadis that one of his conditions is that they have to give up half their guns and ammunition to Rick and his group, opposite to in the original series, where Rick had to find guns to give them, and Jadis ultimately accepts, but not before making him fight that spiked walker, of course. Though perhaps Rick doesn't get a spike shoved straight through his hand, because what is he, Wolverine? How does he keep healing so fast? Rick's people are obviously very wary about trusting them, but Rick says that they are going to need their help since Hilltop hasn't committed to joining them yet. But he doesn't tell them everything, keeping Dwight's existence a secret. Meanwhile, we cut back to Maggie raising her adopted daughter back at Hilltop and secretly holding meetings with anti-savior volunteers who she says are going to aid Rick in his fight against the Saviors. And then it cuts to the people back at Alexandria training for the incoming war with BB guns, as Gabriel gives a speech about how he has faith that God will shine favor upon them in the war, but faith without works is dead, and they need to fight as hard as they can to win, as well as the kingdom with the king training his soldiers, and Morgan, who can't bring himself to look at Henry after how he killed his father training with Jesus. While Rick and the people he took with him going back to tell Alexandria of the new allies they have gained. In episode 16, Rick of course returns to Alexandria to stock up the armory and warns the Alexandrians that they might have to prepare for new arrivals to check out their quote-unquote vacation homes. However, still not knowing if they can trust them or not, Rick goes over to the kingdom to get Jesus and Dwight's take on it, as they are the most in the loop generally. Jesus says that he has never heard of them before, but he knows of some people from Hilltop who went on runs and never came back, and they might have been taken by the Scavengers. Dwight says that the garbage people are a bad ally to make. They were able to keep their guns because they never even tried to fight back against Negan and surrendered to the Saviors immediately, and he doesn't know where their true intentions lie. However, Rick says that they need to trust them either way, as they are threatening to turn them into the Saviors anyway. Dwight gives Rick the plan that he came up with along with Jesus for how to defeat the Saviors, and says that they should let him return to the sanctuary so that he can check himself to see if the scavengers told Negan about Rick's plan, and so that he can free Eugene. Daryl, of course, as well as many others, are completely against letting him go, but Dwight says that if he doesn't report back, Negan will get suspicious, and Dwight gives them time and a place close to the sanctuary where they can get Eugene, who will relay the information to them. So in the end, they allow Dwight to go back. Meanwhile, with Morgan growing away from Henry, Carol tries to bond with him and train him how to defend himself with a gun, foreshadowing how she would later adopt him as her son, but still feeling incredibly guilty about her being indirectly responsible for his remaining family being killed. She tries to talk to him about it, to find out what he knows, and realizes that he doesn't know what she, his dad, or Morgan did, and keeps it close to her chest, telling him that even though he is feeling unbelievable pain right now, he needs to learn to accept what happened and stay safe. Later, she would try to confide with Daryl about it, who is also there, with her admitting to him that she hates herself for everything she has done, and she knows that she needs to help her friends win the war, but she doesn't know how she can find the strength to keep going after everything. Daryl tells her that he has made tons of mistakes that led to horrible consequences, and if it weren't for her, none of them would even be alive by now. And the best thing she can do is do right by Henry to make up for it, so her confidence is somewhat renewed. Then Rick arrives back at the kingdom to tell them of the progress they have made, and that the day will soon be approaching when they get the jump on Negan. And he tells Ezekiel that the kingdom forces will need to arrive in Alexandria by the time that Negan is scheduled to return there for his payment. Ezekiel says that he is on it, and Daryl and Jesus go with Rick to Hilltop, and Morgan also tags along, saying a heartfelt goodbye to Carol and Henry, as he will be fighting alongside Jesus at Hilltop. When they do end up getting back to Hilltop, Rick makes his final push to convince Gregory to join their cause, showing him the guns and ammo that they obtained, and telling him that he got the support of the kingdom and the scavengers. However, Gregory is still adamant that they can't join Rick, and that under no circumstances will any resident of Hilltop outside of Jesus participate in the war, and that he is praying for their victory, but it is a lost cause, and Hilltop can't be implicated in it. But then Jesus starts speaking out against him, as well as many of his people, including Earl Sutton and his wife and remaining sons. And then Maggie gives a speech about how they can't stay out of it because any number of things could go wrong in war, which is exactly why they need to offer Alexandria and the kingdom all the support they can get. However, Gregory says that Maggie isn't the leader, he is, and that they can't win, after which Maggie punches him in the face and says, "Maybe you can't win, but I believe in Rick Grimes," which I am so pissed they got cut from the comics in the show and given to Rosita for some reason later. So it looks like the people are on Maggie's side, and Gregory is just biding his time, trying to figure out what to do. Meanwhile, then we get a scene of the leader of the outpost that picks up the scavengers' tribute going to interrogate them about whether or not they're aiding Jesus, Daryl, and Sherry. And they actually deny it, and then the Saviors rip apart the entire junkyard, and they aren't able to find anything because Scott, who is still there, is nice and hidden away in a secret location. But they do find some suspicious things in another way. A fully temperature-controlled room, medical and other supplies that would never be found in a junkyard, and a suspicious helipad. The Savior leader asks them about these strange apparitions, and Jadis asks if Jesus would be flying to her on a helipad. But he takes notice of how they seem to have less guns than usual, and asks to see the record in their armory, to which Jadis replies that they don't keep a record. And he leaves, but not before telling them to watch their backs, or they will be sorry. So in my rewrite, the scavengers actually do want to take down Negan, which will make their betrayal later more surprising and heartbreaking. Then we get back to Rick and his coalition, with him saying that before Negan arrives, they need to get someone over to the sanctuary to pick up Eugene and get the information on the scavengers from Dwight. So of course Jesus goes. However, Rosita and Francine go too, saying that they owe it to Eugene after they got him captured by Negan. Which means that in my rewrite, they don't act like complete fucking idiots and go on a suicide mission to kill Negan alone. Then it cuts to Gregory looking pretty suspicious and taking Cal to leave Hilltop, and the episode ends there. In episode 17, it has Jesus, Rosita, and Francine, of course, going back to the sanctuary to pick up Eugene. And this is where Rosita and Francine have their heart-to-heart like Sasha and Rosita do in the original series, and Francine apologizes for stealing Abraham away from her. But Rosita says that she knows that he loved her, and he was the real asshole for cheating on her. She questions if she ever even loved Spencer in the first place, or if it was just a fling to get over losing Abraham, and jokes about moving on to Jesus next, and he responds that he isn't exactly of the female persuasion. Then the two make a pact that they aren't going to do anything stupid anymore, and they will give everything, including their lives, to help Alexandria win the war. They get near the sanctuary, but to their surprise, they actually find that Eugene is walking outside the sanctuary with savior guards ordering them around. They, of course, kill the guards and try to get Eugene to go with them, but he refuses, calling for help. And then they get surrounded, but Jesus manages to fight a lot of them off and help them escape. But with them being tailed, Francine tells them to go and that she is slower and not as good a fighter as them, so she needs to sacrifice herself so that they can escape, so they do, while Francine stays behind to get captured. Then, of course, Francine is brought to the cell and locked in, and then the events of the original show play out with Rapey Davy, only it's Francine this time, and she gets shot, and also she shot Negan's Lucille, which means Negan is going to be a lot more pissed at her. But she starts talking about Abraham and how Lucille killed someone important to her and how it's only fair she did what she did. Negan actually ends up respecting her moxie and, of course, makes a deal that if she gets Rick to call off his plan, then no one has to die, revealing that a little birdie told him about Rick's rebellion. He then brings Eugene in to talk to Francine, but not alone, as he wants to hear everything they say, and Eugene doesn't give her the sleeping pills this time because that didn't even make sense if he believed that surrendering to Negan was the best way to prevent people from being killed. Instead, Francine is incredibly mad at him for his betrayal of Abraham and Alexandria, but realizes that his feelings are genuine in wanting to save Alexandria, and says that she will help Negan to get Rick to stand down. So Negan leaves her in a room with Rapey Davy to kill him, but when he comes back, Francine has already slit her wrists, because why would Sasha have needed sleeping pills to kill herself if she had a knife? And her and Davy, who has "You're all done for" carved into his chest, try to eat Eugene, but Negan saves him. And he saves the Francine Walker from being killed by his men because he still has a use for her. And maybe we don't need an extended series of flashbacks / dream sequences where Francine thinks about Abraham like Sasha did. A heartfelt convo with Rosita and Eugene about it is enough. So since in my rewrite the characters don't have to go to Oceanside for more guns, everything is pretty much geared up for the home stretch now. Then we see Rosita and Jesus observing forces going out from the Savior compound, and they go as fast as they can to warn the Alliance, using Daryl's motorbike that he lent them. We also see things back at Hilltop with Maggie making a speech to everyone that the time has come to fight back, and they form a militia, with Gregory having left for who knows where, and Morgan tells Maggie that he is prepared to fight and kill if necessary. But there has to be something after, and that she should consider taking prisoners of war in the fight. Maggie says that she will think about it, while being concerned Jesus still hasn't returned yet, and wondering where Gregory went. Meanwhile, we see back at the kingdom, King Ezekiel gearing his subjects up for war, saying that there is only one true king in the kingdom, and his name is not Negan. And he tries to comfort Henry on his loss, saying that since he has no family, he can live with the king. And then Carol goes and ends up confessing to Henry about how she prompted his father to delay their delivery to the Saviors, leading to his death. And Benjamin ended up getting killed because of it. Henry is incredibly pissed at her and doesn't even want to speak to her anymore, but King Ezekiel tells her that she did the right thing by telling him, and then he gets all flirty with her, telling her that the king will protect her in the heat of battle, and she says, more like I'll be protecting the king. Then, of course, we see back at Alexandria the scavengers coming back with Scott, who is terrified, and also a little turned on by Jadis, and they check out their new vacation homes at Alexandria. They, of course, act a little too enthusiastic, trying to check basically everything out and raiding Alexandria's slim pantry. And also there's a scene of one of the scavengers telling Alexandria that they have the wiring for the explosives all wrong, and he was an electrician expert, so he needs to fix it. And then it cuts to Negan driving with Eugene to Alexandria, telling him that he needs to step up if he wants to disarm the conflict. And he says that it's a good thing that they had their little birdie with them to tell them about Rick's plans, panning over to Dwight smirking, and faking out the audience before it cuts back to Rick confirming to Carl that everything is going to be okay, and the episode ends there. In episode 18, we finally get to the first battle for Alexandria. Michonne, who is up at the watchtower practicing her aim, has a scavenger come up there and tell her that she is a much better shot than her, but Michonne is suspicious and stays on the watchtower duty with her. And then, of course, Negan does show up and things play out pretty much exactly as they do originally, with Eugene proclaiming "I am Negan" in one of the best scenes in Season 7, and Rick trying to kill him, and the Scavengers' betrayal. As I said before in my rewrite, the Scavengers were originally trying to ally with Rick to get Negan off their back, but Negan says, I want you to see that I can be reasonable, Rick. I mean, look at the scavengers. I found out that they were planning on betraying me and working with you, and I didn't even take their guns away or kill them. Granted, they didn't massacre an entire outpost full of saviors, but the point is, I want people to be my friends, not my enemies. And if you knew shit, which you don't, you'd want to be my friend, just like Eugene did. I mean, after you tried to fucking kill him, I don't really think he's going to want to be your friend anymore, and he is going to be making me all the bullets I want. And then, of course, Negan pulls out a restrained Francine with a bag over her head, trying to convince them that she is alive to get them to lay down their weapons. But Daryl realizes what's up in 2 seconds flat and shoots her in the arm, saying that she is a walker, after which Rick socks Jadis in the face and steals her gun, and doesn't get shot in the love handles because how was he totally fine after that? And the Alexandrians try to fight off the scavengers and Negan, but they are far too much, and many Alexandrians end up dying, including Scott, who ends up getting clipped by Jadis. Because if the show wasn't going to use him properly, it could have at least given him a shocking character death. Rick and Carl get guns pointed at their heads, and just like originally, Negan threatens killing Carl to Rick. After Rick thinks Michonne has been shoved off of the watchtower, but this time, after Rick doesn't yield, Negan doesn't try to kill Carl and instead says, "Spencer was right about you, Rick," and then he goes to bash Rick's head in instead, before Shiva of course attacks, because it just felt a little uncharacteristic that Negan would kill Carl so casually after he had taken such a liking to him. And now we get to the fight itself. Quite honestly, the first battle for Alexandria in the series was a little underwhelming, especially compared to the fight in the comics, which was longer and had a lot more shit in it. So rather than just about 4 minutes of actual combat like in the original fight, the battle is a lot more dynamic. First, the Kingdom arrives and they are able to push back the scavengers, and Negan ends up getting cornered, hiding behind a truck as his men are getting slaughtered. And Rick comes straight up to kill him, but just like in the comics, Negan was careful and hit a bunch of snipers and soldiers behind him, and one of them shoots off Rick's trigger finger, which would serve as an explanation maybe for why he keeps missing Negan when he tries to shoot him later in the series. After this, Dwight beats the shit out of Rick and pulls a knife to his neck, and Negan's men take the upper hand in the battle against, again, with more reinforcements. But then Hilltop arrives, with Jesus and Rosita having warned both Ezekiel and Maggie, and the fight becomes more even. Rick escapes from Dwight, with Negan about to shoot him, but much like in the comics, Jesus comes in and holds a gun to Negan's head, because why did the show not utilize Jesus more? Also, the show should have had Carl gunning down a bunch of Negan's men like he does in the comics. Jesus forces Negan's men to stand down as Negan commands them not to fire, and they're slaughtered by Rick's forces. And as Rick gets back to Alexandria, he realizes that Dwight had slipped him a piece of paper into his belt while he was wrestling with him, and it has the locations where all the snipers are located. So he takes a chance and sends people to take out the snipers, and then Negan manages to disarm Jesus, and they get into close quarters combat with Jesus nearly slitting his throat, but Negan managing to get away. Jadis tells Negan her people are dying, and she abandons him to go back home with the scavengers. Dwight tells Negan that they can't retreat because if they lose here, it will show them that the Saviors are weak and will start a war. But Negan says that Rick will kill them all, and they need to retreat or lose everything, and that if it's a war they want, if it's a war they want, it's a war they've got. So they all end up retreating. Rick and his crew celebrate their victory, and Rick is of course incredibly relieved that Michonne is all right. And he tells her and Carl that he will never let anything bad happen to them. Then it cuts to Negan returning to the sanctuary and announcing that they are going to war, showing the enormous amounts of people that he has under him. In episode 19, we see the Alliance at Alexandria trying to mourn for the losses in the battle and trying to figure out what to do next. They prepare a burial for the people who died, like Scott and Francine, who didn't somehow, make their way outside of Alexandria for them to find, like the Sasha Walker did originally. Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. She left the place with a lot of noise and fresh meat to go wander out in the middle of nowhere. Makes no fucking sense. Rick says that Dwight told him the positions of the snipers and lookouts, and he thinks that he is still on their side, but people like Daryl, Tara, and Heath are of course incredibly skeptical. But then they find a note left behind on the battlefield by Dwight explaining what happened. It says that he tried to free Eugene from the Savior compound, but he didn't want to go, and threatened to turn him into Negan. So Dwight had to constantly watch Eugene to make sure he didn't blow his cover, and that Gregory was the one who turned them in and ratted out the scavengers since Rick told him about them. But since neither Gregory or the scavengers knew about Dwight, he only has to worry about Eugene. Cut to Eugene being interrogated about if he knew anything about what Rick was trying to do, with Dwight right next to him, and Eugene says that he didn't know anything to try to save his own ass. And then Negan addresses the people living at the sanctuary to assuage their fears, and goes for a meeting with Gregory. Then it cuts to Alexandria, where Rick is reading Dwight's plan with a patched hand due to the finger loss, which is as close to the whole hand he lost in the comics as we are ever going to get. And Dwight suggests to them that they attack the sanctuary first by surprise, taking out all the lookouts on the way, and to trap the people inside with walkers, which would leave them free to attack the other outposts. Ultimately, Rick accepts this plan, of course, and says that it will be a lightning war. They need to win as quickly as possible with limited ammo and supplies, and they will go outpost to outpost, taking the guns and ammo from the saviors they kill. Rick tells them that tells them all to go see their families and see them off before they go to war, as they will all be going to attack the sanctuary the very next morning. Speaking of which, to keep track of the timeline, 34 days have passed since the Season 9 finale. The rest of the episode is then basically dedicated to the preparations for the giant fight against the sanctuary, which will serve as the finale of the season. We get the scene of Ezekiel encouraging his people that we saw in the episode Some Guy in Season 8. We get the scene in The Big Scary You of Gabriel praying to God. We see Maggie rallying her people, and Rick tells Carl and Michonne that they are going to have to lead Alexandria now, with him leading the Alliance, and that he doesn't want them on the battlefield. However, Carl questions how his father can leave them both in Alexandria completely defenseless, but he once again says that he is keeping them safe by being proactive and killing their enemies, and tells them some war stories that his grandfather told him from his childhood. Carl accepts what his dad says, saying there's no going back now. And then we see the scenes of him caring for Judith and writing the letters to people that were in the Season 8 episode Honor originally, but he hasn't been bitten by a walker this time. He's just dreading that he is going to die, as the war might be lost. Then as Rick wakes up the next morning, we get another little reference to the We Are the Walking Dead speech, where he says, "Rest in peace, soldier. Now get up and go to war." By this point, 35 days have passed since the Season 9 finale. Then it cuts to Negan's meeting with Gregory that was originally in The Big Scary You, with an important little detail thrown in with Simon suggesting that they kill off half the population of each community, leaving only the weaklings left. And when Negan says that there is no way they are doing that, Simon says it worked at Oceanside. And then we get to see Rick's speech about a larger world that he makes to the Alliance, and the episode ends with everyone cheering. Also, Negan doesn't say he likes killing people in the episode, talking to Gregory, and I think it would be much more in character for him to very sarcastically say that he hates killing people. In episode 20, we at last get to the grand finale with the siege on the sanctuary. It starts out with Rick having a vision of him waking up in the future with a cane and a white beard with Carl, Michonne, and a grown-up Judith, which, yes, would be in his vision in my rewrite, and not Carl's vision. And then it cuts to reality with the Alliance's plan to lead the walkers and take out the lookouts, which is expanded upon more in my rewrite. Aside from Daryl not needing to communicate with Dwight by arrows since he already gave them his plans, and Carl not coming across Sadiq, then things pretty much play out exactly like they did originally. However, after Gregory is pulled out by Simon, a few of the Hilltop soldiers do abandon Rick's cause, like in the comics. And then Rick finishes counting to 3 this time, and this is an important bit of continuity that I'm going to pay off later. So he shoots and they enact their plan, but with a few changes. This time, since Rick and the group are dealing with much more limited ammo, they try to use as little as possible and don't shoot up all the windows, and get the Saviors to waste as much of theirs as possible using a smoke screen, and Rick commands everyone to charge into the compound under its cover, which causes the Saviors to frantically rain lead on them, getting them to waste their bullets as nobody actually charged. Only one person ends up dying in the assault on the Alliance's side, another one of Earl's sons, and Gabriel, of course, gets left behind when he goes to save Gregory, who escapes with the people from Hilltop who dropped out of the fight. Then it cuts to Rick's speech about how they have already won, and then it cuts to Rick's vision of the future uncut, where he is celebrating Thanksgiving with everyone, including people who killed Negan, like Glenn, and who Negan killed, like Glenn and Abraham, and Dwight and even Negan are sitting around the table too, with Judith calling him Uncle Negan. This is before it cuts to a flash forward with Rick sitting under the tree after the battle is over, alone, with the gaping wound on his leg, and he doesn't say, "My mercy prevails over my wrath," to avoid spoiling what happened to the audience. And then the end credits scene shows Negan with Gabriel saying that he is about to shit his pants. Anyway, that is Season 10 of my rewrite for The Walking Dead. 20 full episodes, by far the longest season so far. There was definitely a lot to set up this season, but I feel that I did a pretty good job in trimming a lot of the fat and filler that was originally in Season 7 of the series and adding some more interesting content in it. It's still largely a setup season for All Out War, but there was also a lot of setup in the comics too, and it was important, so I think I did a good job of reworking Season 7 of the original show into a coherent and sharply written 20-episode storyline with my Season 10. Tune in next time where we get into perhaps the most controversial season of The Walking Dead, and the point where many fans just dropped off the show entirely, Season 8, All Out War. Be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, check out my other content. I am the Aromantic Shipper, and as always, remember, just because you can't feel love doesn't mean you shouldn't want other people to. Bye.